Hello everyone, today we will continue to talk about China's Nobel Prize winner Liu Cixin's most famous novel, the second installment of the three-body series, The Dark Forest. This is my personal favorite, and after reading it, you will have a sense of enlightenment, which will elevate your thinking to a higher level. So let's get started. The story of The Dark Forest begins with a conversation. Luo Ji, who came to pay respects at Yang Dong's grave with his high school classmates, met Yi Wenjie, who had come to say goodbye to her daughter. Under the witness of the brown ants crawling on the grave, Yi Wenjie explained to Luo Ji the two fundamental axioms and two important concepts in the cosmic society, completing the handover ceremony between the old and new protagonists. At the same time, in a conversation with the Trisolarans before his death, Evans discovered that the Trisolaran dictionary did not have the words disguise and strategy. Their thinking was transparent, and because of their fear of human lies, they no longer trusted Evans. This also explains why the Sophan did not tell Evans about the Guzheng plan at the end of the first book. And so, humanity entered the crisis era. In the third year of the crisis era, Luo Ji, who had just awakened from a night of passion, had already forgotten the name of the woman beside him. Yes, our protagonist lived such a romantic life every day. However, this kind of life was soon disrupted by a car accident. As they were on their way downstairs to eat, a car came speeding towards them. The protagonist Luo Ji narrowly avoided the accident, but his companion was hit and killed. Luo Ji, who was involved in the accident, was taken away by the police for investigation. The person in charge was the familiar retired soldier, Shi Chang. They flew to a mysterious destination by plane. During the flight, Luo Ji remembered a memorable love story between the female lead in his novel and himself. When the plane descended to the United Nations building, Luo Ji realized that he had been invited to attend a counterattack strategy meeting against the Trisolarans. The conference announced an important counterattack strategy, which was the Wallfacer project. To avoid the monitoring of Sophans, the United Nations resolved to select a group of strategists and leaders to develop strategic plans solely relying on their own thinking without any communication with the outside world, targeting the weakness of the Trisolarans' inability to deceive. These people were called Wallfacers. They included Frederick Taylor, the former U.S. Secretary of Defense with rich experience in counterterrorism command, Manuel Radiazzi, the current president of Venezuela who had been sanctioned for developing nuclear weapons, Bill Hines, a scientist who had been nominated for both Nobel Prizes for his outstanding achievements in human brain structure and intelligence development, and Luo Ji, who was being mentored by Yi Wenjie to prepare for the establishment of cosmic sociology. The Wallfacer project aroused the Trisolarans' alertness. In an underground basement, a remnant of the ETO, who was about to commit suicide, suddenly received a message from the Lord. Because only humans could uncover human schemes, the Trisolarans reactivated the ETO organization and developed the Wallbreaker project. In the world of three-body game, the remnants of the ETO held a meeting and selected 3 Wallbreakers against the first 3 Wallfacers. However, Luo Ji had no Wallbreaker, because he would confront the main force directly. For Luo Ji, the only thing ETO could do was to complete the mysterious task that Evans had failed to accomplish, which was to assassinate him. At the Wallfacer meeting, Luo Ji, who heard his name unexpectedly, repeatedly refused this identity. However, from that moment on, everything the Wallfacers did was seen as part of the plan. When Luo Ji angrily walked out of the meeting room, unable to shake off the identity of a Wallfacer, a bullet hit his chest, but he survived because of his bulletproof vest. After recovering, Luo Ji decided to embrace his wallfacer identity since he could not shake it off. He requested to go to a paradise backed by snow-capped mountains and facing a lake, where Shi Chang promised to help him find the perfect girl in the novel. A few days later, the goddess arrived. Her name was Zhuang Yan, a graduate of the Central Academy of Fine Arts. From then on, she became the happiest girl in the world and part of the Wallfacer project. To make Zhuang Yan happy, Luo Ji even accompanied her to fly to the Louvre. In front of the smile of the Mona Lisa, they fell in love. After successfully finding love, Luo Ji doesn't forget to thank Shi Chang. However, to his surprise, Shi Chang has contracted leukemia due to exposure to nuclear radiation during the operation against the ETO organization years ago. With a glimmer of hope in future medical technology, Shi Chang enters hibernation. Compared to Luo Ji's tenacity, the other three wallfacers are all pushing forward with their own plans. Radiotzi is tirelessly working to create a giant nuclear bomb with a yield of 200 million tons. During a nuclear test, he develops a strange phobia and can no longer look directly at the sun. Taylor, on the one hand, collected the raw material, macro atoms, for making Starfire and traveled around the world tirelessly. Due to the close-range attack property of Starfire, the former U.S. Secretary of Defense traveled to Japan, China, and even Afghanistan, hoping to organize a space kamikaze special forces team for suicide attacks. However, all of his requests were rejected. Hines, on the other hand, focused on improving human intelligence with the help of his wife Keiko Yamasuji. He hoped to achieve the brain evolution process that would have taken 2 million years in just the next 2 centuries by directly connecting human brains with computers. At this moment, the efforts of Earthlings are not limited to the Wallfacer project. Countries around the world have established their own space forces. Zhang Beihai, the political commissar of the former Chinese Navy's Tang aircraft carrier, was among the first members of China's Space Force. Because of his steadfast victory-oriented thinking, he was appointed by General Chang Wei-si as the leader of the Future Political Work Special Mission Team, responsible for preventing any potential defeatism within the future fleet. 5 years later, Luo Ji lived in that Eden without any concern for the world. He had married Zhuang Yan and had a child, leading a peaceful life as a godlike being. But this peace was disrupted by the arrival of another wallfacer. The visitor was Taylor, who recounted his nightmarish experiences to Luo Ji. One day, a strange, humble attendant arrived at Taylor's underground residence and brought him a devilish greeting. "Frederick Taylor, I am your wallbreaker." This wallbreaker ruthlessly exposed all of Taylor's plans, which centered on the space Pearl Harbor. On the surface, Taylor wanted to establish a space force equipped mainly with ball lightning and macro-nuclear fusion weapons, and to tour the world in search of remnants of self-sacrifice within human society. In reality, the true target of this space commando was not the Trisolarans, but the Earth's main fleet. When the human fleet launched its attack, the Suicide Squad carrying quantum weapons would launch a suicide attack against their own fleet. In the blue explosion, Taylor would gain a ghostly quantum space force, blocking the path of the Trisolaran fleet. The breakthrough man finally told Taylor that even if his plan was fully realized, the Lord would not care about this quantum fleet. The exposure of his plan and the contempt of the Trisolarans left Taylor utterly desperate. After pouring out his heart to Luo Ji that night, Taylor shot himself by the lake. Only 3 wallfacers remained. Taylor's suicide prompted the Planetary Defense Council, PDC, to hold an emergency hearing. At the hearing, Radiotzi and Shi Chang respectively presented their progress on their plans. Then the two chose to enter hibernation and wait for computer technology to meet their plan's needs. At this point, Zhuang Yan also entered hibernation with her child. According to the United Nations investigation, from the initial car accident to the later shooting incident at the UN, all were planned ETO assassination activities. This fully demonstrates the fear of the Trisolarans towards Luo Ji. The UN therefore hopes that Luo Ji can put aside his personal feelings and find out the reasons that make the Trisolarans afraid, and become their breakthrough person. After losing his wife and child, Luo Ji begins to take on the responsibility of facing the wall. In the dim starry sky, Luo Ji walks on the ice of the lake, and he begins to carefully ponder the conversation he had with Yi Wenjie in front of Yang Dong's tomb years ago. There were two axioms. 1. Survival is the primary need of civilization. 2. Civilization continues to grow and expand, but the total amount of matter in the universe remains constant. And two important concepts. 1. The chain of suspicion. When two unfamiliar civilizations discover each other's existence, both are unable to determine each other's good or evil, and both will inevitably fall into an infinite chain of suspicion towards each other. 2. Technological explosion. In the development process of every civilization, there is a possibility of a technological explosion-like progress. Therefore, a weak civilization is likely to surpass a more advanced civilization in a short period of time through a technological explosion. Just when his thoughts are at a standstill, the larger ice under Luo Ji suddenly cracks, causing him to fall into the cold lake. In the dead silence, as black as space, he seems to see the truth of the universe. Climbing up to the surface of the lake after surviving, Luo Ji tells himself that he is his own breakthrough person. The next day, Luo Ji left the dreamlike Eden and returned to an underground shelter in his homeland, where he formulated his own plan of facing the wall. At the remote Planet Defense Council, Luo Ji announced his plan, the Star Curse. The method was to use the amplified power of the sun to transmit a curse into outer space, containing 3 blueprints marked with the coordinates of a star system beyond the solar system. Just as everyone was puzzled about the plan, Luo Ji was attacked by a deadly weapon, the gene missile. This flu virus targeted his genes and caused him to quickly become ill, coughing up blood. He was immediately put into hibernation. At the same time the curse was sent out, the Trisolaran fleet launched 10 small probes towards Earth at lightning speed. 4 years later, Captain Zhang Beihai of the future political military received orders to enter hibernation. However, he had a matter to attend to first. Zhang Beihai had discussed energy issues with Dr. Ding Yi multiple times, and he knew that a star system fleet must use radiation propulsion to meet the demands of the expedition. It is worrisome that the old guard, who holds the discourse power in the aerospace system, strongly advocates for the use of traditional rocket propulsion systems. To clear obstacles, Zhang Beihai performed a meteor shower with homemade iron meteor bullets, calmly shooting and killing 3 old-school aerospace authorities in space. This ensured the direction of future fleet research. Afterwards, Zhang Beihai led the political mission team into hibernation and towards the future. 4 years later, 2 wall-facing individuals, Radiazzi and Heinz, were awakened. Heinz, who was awakened later, saw his wife Keiko Yamasugi's 8-year research achievement, a computer that simulates the holographic imaging of the human brain. Through further research using this device, Heinz achieved a shocking unexpected result, thought steel printing. Heinz discovered that by scanning a certain neural point of the brain through a supercomputer, a pseudo-proposition could be engraved in the test subject's brain, making them believe it deeply. After intense debate within the Space Defense Council, the conference finally agreed that under strict supervision, members of the Space Force could voluntarily receive a mental imprint of the belief in human victory. Soon after, a group of Space Force members who firmly believed in human victory emerged, bearing the mental imprint. With this satisfactory outcome, the Heinz couple once again entered hibernation. Meanwhile, radiotsie nuclear bomb research also yielded new results. The first star-shaped hydrogen bomb had been built, and it successfully exploded on the surface of Mercury. The splashing rocks formed a ring of stars in Mercury's orbit. The immense power frightened the whole world. Heads of state from various countries called and urged for the immediate sharing of nuclear bomb technology. Amongst the numerous phone calls, an uninvited psychiatrist claimed that he could treat radiotsie non-existent fear of the sun. Yes, he was the one who had broken through radiotsie mental barrier. In the account given by the wallbreaker, the truth behind radiotsie's wall facing was gradually uncovered. It was the Mercury into the Sun plan. As it turned out, radiotsie, who appeared to be extremely obsessed with nuclear weapons, did not actually intend to launch any attacks with them. Instead, he wanted to use the explosive power of millions of giant hydrogen bombs to slow down Mercury and make it fall out of orbit into the Sun. The resulting stellar matter would be ejected, forming an atmosphere that would expand continuously until it sucked in all the planets, including Earth, into the Sun, turning the entire solar system into a more terrifying hell than the three-body system. Radiotsie hoped to use this to blackmail the three-body civilization into not advancing. Despite this, the wallfacers ultimately told radiotsie that firstly, even if all of Earth's resources were exhausted, humanity could not produce millions of stellar hydrogen bombs. Secondly, no amount of hydrogen bombs would slow down Mercury. Therefore, like Taylor before you, your threats are meaningless. Radiotsie, whose plan had been exposed, was ignited with fury. He angrily grabbed the wallfacers by the neck until the guards rushed in to separate them. A few days later at the meeting, Radiotsie's plan was met with strong opposition from around the world, and he faced trial for anti-human crimes in military court. However, at that moment, Radiotsie suddenly raised his hand, and everyone noticed a wristwatch-like device on his wrist. It was the cradle system, a signal transmitter connected to Radiotsie's vital signs. Radiotsie claimed that the other end was connected to a nuclear bomb in the center of New York City. Just like a baby's cradle, once Radiotsie's heart stopped beating, the nuclear bomb on the other end would be triggered, and the baby would wake up. 8.2 million people in New York City would be buried with him. So, Radiotsie boarded a special plane back to his home country. On the plane, he casually took off the transmitter from his wrist and gave it to the UN chairman who accompanied him. In fact, the so-called cradle system was just Radiotsie's escape trick. When Radiotsie returned to his homeland and opened his arms to his people, he was met with countless stones of hatred. People loathed his doomsday plan. Thus, Radiotsie, the wallfacer, was buried in a storm of angry stones. At this point, only 2 wallfacers remained. 185 years later, Luo Ji woke up from hibernation and was greeted by the magnificent underground city of the future. Various types of aircraft shuttled back and forth in the air, and all buildings hung on underground pillars like tree trunks. Luo Ji was amazed by everything from self-heating cups and artificially synthesized bread to clothing, umbrella-shaped bicycles, and aircraft. But what shocked Luo Ji even more was the political landscape of the Earth today. The human world is now divided into 2 parts, Earth International, which continues the traditional concept of countries and is the main territory of the Earth, and Fleet International, which is composed of the three major fleets of Eurasia, North America, and space, and has space as its territory. The latter has a total of 2,000 interstellar warships capable of reaching speeds of 15% of the speed of light, more than twice the number of the Trisolaran fleet. With such a space military force, the new generation of Earthlings swept away the despair of 2 centuries ago and showed great confidence in the impending war. In the new century, Luo Ji, who had also recovered his health, met his friend Shi Chang. Overjoyed, Luo Ji was invited to attend the holographic hearing of the final Wallfacer project. Here, he met the awakened Heinz and his wife. At the conference, the representatives unanimously rejected and terminated the Wallfacer project, which had lasted for 205 years. Luo Ji, who had regained his civilian status, withdrew from the remote conference. Just as everyone was about to leave the venue, Keiko Yamasuji suddenly uttered a sentence that froze the air: "Wallfacer Heinz, I am your breaker." As Heinz's wife, she exposed her husband's Wallfacer plan. She pointed out that as a successful cover-up of his own defeatism, Heinz had inverted the instructions by modifying the positive and negative signs in the mathematical model of the ideology steel stamp. This means that the belief engraved in the mind of every ideology steel stamp space fleet is not that humanity will win, but that it will lose. Hearing this, the scene was exactly the same as when Red Coast raised the cradle bracelet years ago, with a dead silence. On the other side, Luo Ji was facing the killer virus, the final assassination plan arranged by ETO a century ago. This virus, designed to target Luo Ji specifically, had caused multiple assassination attempts including a car accident, a collapsed manhole cover, a falling electronic billboard, a robot waiter assassination, delivery of hibernation drugs, and a locked-up transforming chair. With the help of Shi Chang, Luo Ji had managed to evade each attempt. At this time, Shi Chang received the good news that his son was still alive. The next day, Luo Ji followed Shi Chang to the surface world where most of the awakened hibernators resided. Through the accounts of his neighbors, Luo Ji learned about a dark period in human history. In the 20 years following his hibernation, the world was plunged into an economic crisis and severe famine. Despairing humans no longer saw Earth as their home and began to resist environmental protection measures and attack each other. With the rapid development of heavily polluting heavy industry, the climate became abnormal and global desertification set in. During the half-century of the Great Downturn, the population, which had originally been 8.3 billion, dwindled to only 3.5 billion survivors. Later, those who had endured the suffering gradually realized that it was better to live in the present than to suffer for the impending end times. They proposed a loud slogan: "Give civilization to time, instead of giving time to civilization." The liberation of human nature brought about a rapid development of technology. Half a century later, humanity began to assemble space fleets, and a new political landscape emerged during that period. Through his neighbor's introduction, Luo Ji's curiosity was temporarily satisfied. Meanwhile, hibernator Zhang Beihai, who was also driven by curiosity, arrived in the new century. Of course, he was most curious about the starfaring fleet. To prevent any potential escape attempts resulting from ideological imprinting, Zhang Beihai was appointed as the commanding officer of the natural selection, and all orders from the original captain, Dongfang Yanqiu, had to be issued through him. Finally, Zhang Beihai boarded the long-awaited interstellar spacecraft. Here, he learned that the spacecraft can reach its maximum flying speed only when it enters the highest propulsion power of 4. In order to adapt to the supergravity brought by the propulsion, each compartment must be filled with a liquid called deep-sea acceleration fluid, so that the crew can breathe directly in it. Soon, humans observed that a probe from the Trisolaran fleet had arrived in the solar system. Due to the balance of political interests and to show the military might of human space forces, the Fleet International decided to send all star-level warships to form a joint fleet to intercept the Trisolaran probe. Before setting off, Zhang Beihai handed over the management power to Dongfang Yanqiu. At this moment, the stunning plan that had been hidden for 2 centuries finally unfolded. To everyone's surprise, Zhang Beihai used the opportunity to reset the password to cut off communication on the spacecraft and set the spacecraft to immediately enter the propulsion power of 4, leaving Dongfang Yanqiu, who was blocked outside the control room, helpless. Thus, based on the human belief inherited from his father that humanity is doomed to fail, the executive officer hijacked the natural selection and fled into deep space. Over 2,000 crew members who were taken hostage were forced to enter the deep sea state. However, after the escape of the natural selection was discovered, the Asian fleet urgently dispatched 4 starships to pursue and intercept it. The defection incident had no impact on the human celebration of welcoming the probe. The vast human fleet set sail from Jupiter, demonstrating the invincible power and dignity of humanity. On board the Quantum, the elderly Ding Yi was looking out the window and would become the first human to inspect the probe up close. When the fleet hovered in front of the probe, the world saw the probe's image for the first time, and everyone was mesmerized by its exquisite appearance, imaginatively calling it a water drop. The human fleet, arranged in a rectangular array, gazed at the perfect curve and ultimate smoothness of the water drop, which floated like a Mercury in the universe, interpreting true beauty to the entire solar system, like a mirror dolphin leaping in the sea of dreams. It was precisely this beauty that made Ding Yi feel a trace of unknown fear. Therefore, before going out for observation, Ding Yi suggested that the Quantum enter deep sea status. The water drop, which had been captured by the small catcher, praying mantis, and was now stored in the cabin, neither escaped nor self-destructed. It waited quietly for the 4-person team composed of Ding Yi and representatives from the 3 factions of Fleet International. When the team finally touched the water drop, they found that even at the limit of 10 million times magnification with an electron microscope, the surface of the water drop was still smooth and flawless. Ding Yi finally realized that the molecules in a water droplet were held tightly together by strong cohesive forces. These forces acted over extremely short distances within the atomic nuclei and even caused the vibration of the molecules to disappear. This is the power that Ding Yi had spent his entire life seeking, a microscopic world beyond human reach. The strength of this water droplet was 100 times greater than the strongest substance in the solar system. For it, passing through the Earth was as easy as a bullet passing through cheese, effortless and without harm. "Run fast," Ding Yi whispered. Then he raised his hands and shouted in despair, "Foolish children, run fast." The image of the mantis distorted and disappeared. No one heard his cry. A halo of expanding light began to appear at the tail of the water droplet, accompanied by a super-high temperature similar to the core of the Sun. The 4 members of the exploration team were instantly vaporized. The body of the mantis also melted like a candle. No one noticed that a liquid residue of the mantis flew towards a corner of the fleet formation. Yes, it was not a residue, it was a water droplet. It made a sharp turn of 30 degrees in space without slowing down and headed straight towards the infinite border in the corner of the formation. A beam of light twice the speed of the third universe emanated from the infinite border and passed through an entire column of space fleets in a straight line direction. At each point of impact, precise locking of fusion fuel cells and the fiery explosion of a thermonuclear bomb appeared in the first column of the fleet. A rain of hot metal magma fell in the universe. In this way, the water droplet flew 2,000 kilometers in 1 minute and 18 seconds, piercing through the first column of 100 warships in the rectangular formation of the Joint Fleet. Then, with a slight buffer, the water droplet made another sharp turn that human space technology could not explain and headed towards the second column. 100 warships exploded like firecrackers within a minute. The water droplet flew up and down like the needle of a death god, using a destructive zigzag to penetrate the third column of 100 warships in this explosive space ocean. More warships were destroyed in collisions with debris or neighboring vessels. Countless crew members on the accelerating spacecraft, who had not yet entered deep sea mode, turned into buds of blood that rushed forward under the heavy weight. The bodies of those inside the cabin were squeezed into a ball, their organs and bones flattened and crushed, turning the entire cabin into a sparkling ruby of human blood. In the metallic cloud formed by the fleet's destruction, droplets moved at 10 times the speed of light, massacring at will. Except for the Quantum and Bronze Age, which followed Ding Yi's advice to enter deep sea state in advance, the entire human fleet was annihilated in an instant. Thus, the only thing that destroyed all of humanity's space power was a drop of the Trisolaran probe, using the most primitive and brutal method of impact. This was the war of the end. What did it matter to you and me? It was on the other side of the universe. When Zhang Beihai woke up from his slumber, he was prepared to face the angry crew calmly. However, as he walked out of the spherical compartment, he was greeted not with anger, but with a respectful military salute. His decision to lead the natural selection, and the 4 pursuing ships to escape the apocalypse between humans and droplets left a spark of hope for Earth's civilization. The members of the 5 fleets held a meeting and named this new world aboard the spaceship as the Starship Earth. They established laws, discussed new social forms, and hoped to continue human civilization. However, the good times did not last long. When the crew realized that they would be forever homeless like kites with broken strings, a psychological imbalance began to spread. Subsequently, incidents of mentally broken crew members killing their roommates began to occur, and even one captain committed suicide with a gun. The desperate darkness spread throughout the fleet. Soon, everyone realized with even greater horror that, for any spaceship, the existing supplies and fuel were far from enough to reach the nearest supply star system. The chain of suspicion led to devilish thoughts, to use the subsonic hydrogen bombs, weapons that each spaceship was equipped with, to take the lives of their companions and plunder their resources. Faced with such a life-and-death situation, the bewildered Easterners rushed to inform their spiritual leader, Zhang Beihai. But when they arrived, Zhang Beihai had already opened the launch system of the subsonic hydrogen bomb. He was willing to play the devil's role on behalf of all the crew members, like a father. However, at the moment when he was about to press the launch button, a wailing alarm suddenly sounded on the natural selection. They were under attack by a neighboring ship, and all the crew members on the natural selection were killed. Meanwhile, at the other end of space, 2 warships were engaged in a dark battle for resources. The only 2 ships left were the Blue Space and the Bronze Age. They each harvested all the available resources and held a solemn space funeral for the deceased, and then disappeared at opposite ends of the universe. This dark battle made Luo Ji more convinced of his own understanding, and he deduced that the rapidly approaching water droplet may be coming to fulfill its mission to murder him. In order to avoid harming the innocent during a droplet attack, Luo Ji left the city and drove alone to a U-shaped valley. At this moment, the droplets arriving on Earth flew over the city and all the way to Luo Ji's head. However, they didn't attack any target. Instead, they suddenly turned and began to emit strong electromagnetic waves towards the sun. Luo Ji laughed when he realized they weren't here to kill him, but to block the sun. Under such strong electromagnetic waves, humans could no longer use the sun to send any messages to outer space. At that moment, Shi Chang arrived, and the two of them drove back to the city. On the way back, their car was suddenly blocked by a dense crowd. They shouted for the savior Luo Ji and knelt in front of the car to pray. Two people walked out of the crowd, one of whom was Heinz. He told Luo Ji that the wallfacer plan had been restarted, and he was the only wallfacer because the star he had cursed was destroyed. At that moment, the whole world listened to Luo Ji's voice, and he demanded that the city be restored to order and dispersed the crowd. Under the silent night sky, only Luo Ji and Shi Chang remained. They came to a sandy area and lit a cigarette. Here, they revealed the ultimate picture of the civilization of the universe, the dark forest law. The universe is a dark forest, and every civilization is a hunter with a gun, lurking in the forest like a ghost and breathing carefully. He must be careful because there are hunters lurking everywhere in the forest just like him. If he discovers other life, whether it's a hunter or not, the only thing he can do is shoot and eliminate them. In this forest, other people are hell, eternal threats. Any life that exposes its existence will be quickly eliminated. This is the picture of the civilization of the universe. This is an explanation of the Fermi paradox, but now, a water droplet has sealed off the only signal transmitter of humanity, the sun. The Trisolaran fleet will soon arrive, and the end of the world for Earth is truly coming. After the Starry Night dialogue, Luo Ji, the wallfacer who revealed the truth of the universe, attended a hearing where the representatives threatened Luo Ji's wife and children to use his messianic reputation to launch an enormous project called the Snowdrift Plan. The Earth fleet attempted to use stellar hydrogen bombs and Neptune's oil-slick substance to create a circle of space dust around the sun in order to track the other 9 water droplets that were set to arrive in 3 years, leaving footprints like walking in the snow when passing through the cloud. Thus, the project was named Snowdrift. To escape reality, Luo Ji threw himself wholeheartedly into the Snowdrift project. When the entire human race found out that the Messiah was being coerced into completing a simple exploration task and could not come up with a new plan to save the world, Luo Ji gradually turned from Messiah to ordinary person in the public eye. People even thought that the cursed stellar explosion was just a random hoax. Luo Ji was just a fraud. Abandoned by everyone, Luo Ji picked up a shovel and went out the door, deciding to go to the graves of Yang Dong and Yi Wenjie, where he would dig his own grave. At the last moment of his life, with his grave already dug, Luo Ji suddenly raised his left hand and whispered, "I want to talk to the three-body world." In his hand was the cradle that Radiotzi had declared years ago. On one end of the system was connected to Luo Ji's heart, while the other end was the 3,614 nuclear bombs that had been placed in the sun's orbit for 2 years during the Snowdrift project. If his heart stopped beating, the bombs would detonate, and the sun would be surrounded by interstellar dust from the oil-slick substance, causing the sun to appear intermittently, constantly flickering like a lighthouse, marking the position of the solar system throughout the universe. With this narrative, Luo Ji weakly raised a pistol, pressed it against his chest, and said to the three-body world that had despised humanity for 2 centuries, "I give you 30 seconds." Soon, 3 spheres appeared in the sky before Luo Ji, displaying the words "ceasefire" together. In front of the deployed proton beam, Luo Ji made 3 demands. First, the water droplets must stop emitting radio waves towards the sun. Second, the other 9 water droplets must leave the solar system. Third, the Trisolaran fleet must immediately turn around and never cross the Oort cloud. Although the third condition meant that the Trisolaran fleet would enter a life-and-death situation in exile, they were not qualified to negotiate with humanity in the face of the sun's radiance. After further agreeing to help build a giant antenna capable of launching spells at any time, Luo Ji ended the negotiations in a victorious manner, saving all of humanity. At this moment, on Yang Dong's tombstone, another small ant, 2 centuries later, proudly waved its 2 antennae at the sun. 5 years later, on an evening, Luo Ji and his family came to the giant antenna to enjoy their peaceful life. At that time, the 3-body monitoring officer, who had been granted freedom by the sovereign to punish him for watching humanity's doomsday, communicated with Luo Ji using protons during the sunset's afterglow. The monitoring officer asked Luo Ji, "Are your children not afraid of the darkness of the sunset?" Luo Ji smiled and told him they were not afraid because he knew that the sun would rise again tomorrow as usual.